Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and greetings to all of our listeners today. My name is Gabe Martinez here with my co-host Tex the Wambui, and we're back with another
What
episode.
up?
And we're back with another episode of Voice to Change. Today we're going to continue our episode three-part episode of Roots of Resilience. And so just welcome back, welcome back. This is going to be a space where we dig deep, speak real, and grow together. My name's Gabe, and in our last episode we did talk about survival mode, what it feels like to constantly be bracing for life. Today, we're talking about what comes next: identity, mental health, and the struggle to just be yourself in a world that constantly tries to define you.
Thank you so much, Gabriel, for that wonderful intro into our Roots of Resilience series here at the Voices of Change. So this will be a three-part series, and today's episode will be called "More Than a Mask," and kind of the theme is around the aspect of Roots of Resilience that we want to talk about within this three-episode series about identity, mental health, and showing up fully. So many of us wear masks. We become what's expected of us, what's safe, what's accepted. And in the process, we start to lose the parts of ourselves that matter most. So today's conversation is about, reclaiming those parts and learning to show up fully, flaws, fire, and all. Everybody has ups and downs. We're just like mountains, just like how the earth is shaped. They say the earth is flat, which is questionable. It's a different discussion. But everything has ups and downs, just like how we sometimes have to go in life. So, this kind of episode, I just kind of talk about that and just kind of break down and unpack those things. We have a few segments today we'll be talking about. But before we get into our first segment of the day, I do want to ask Gabriel a question. All right. All right. I just sent you a reel on IG. This is something that just, I thought about before we recorded this. It's a reel that got posted by the Shade Room, and they over here talking about since breast milk ice cream is hitting the aisles, what if we had these flavors too? They got henny butter pecan, hot honey cornbread combo, fried chicken and waffle crunch, red velvet revival, peach cobbler la mode. What the hell is what is la mode? Anyways, crown apple crumble, banana pudding dream, Kool-Aid pickle freeze. All right, I'm not gonna read all of them, but out of those, what would the ice cream flavor you would want to see created?
So back in this thing, live and direct. It's Gabe Martinez. One thing that you did not read off was the grape drink. I ain't gonna lie, I tear that up. Yes, sir. Come on now. But a close second for me, it might be a tie for first is the banana pudding dream because
Yeah.
your boy loves some
Yeah,
banana pudding. Come on now, talk to me nice.
yeah,
Holla if you hear me.
that banana pudding one definitely was my top one. But my question is why the hell are we making breast milk ice cream? Like, who's eating that? Like, what?
You know, there's a thing that they do. Women will mail in their excess breast milk into some companies, and then they'll take that to make those ice creams because supposedly it's a very nutritious and it replenishes different types of nutrients in your body, especially for younger children, and I think like people that have like weak bones. But don't quote me on this. That's just my
I I never knew that. I never knew that. Well, anyways, let's get back to our conversation for today.
yes, sir.
So we'll do segment one where we're just gonna talk about the question is who am I really, right? And I'll let you, Gabe, kind of lead us in this conversation, and we'll kind of
Yeah, of
delve into
course.
this part of the conversation today.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm happy to. Yes, sir. So, our first segment, guys, is who am I really? Right? It's a question that we all may ask ourselves in our walks in life. Maybe when you're younger, maybe when you're older. Every day, some days, maybe never. But it's a real question that we all are faced with at some point. You look in the mirror, you look at the man or woman in the mirror, and you ask yourself, like, what am I doing? Who am I? And what are the steps that I need to take to get to where I want to be, or who am I currently, and who do I want to become? So let's be real. It's really hard to know, though, who you are, when you've been told who you are to be or who you're supposed to be since day one, right? From the moment that we leave the womb, we are socialized and subjugated to what we're supposed to be in the eyes of our parents, in the eyes of our community, in the eyes of our direct associates and friends, and in the eyes of the judicial system, everything, right? We are. put into quote unquote a box, right? We're put into an expectation of how we're supposed to be. Here in America, there's an idea of the model minority, or in addition as well the model American, right? You go to school, you have you get a job, have kids, go to work, etc., and then you pass away. Now, whether it's family, whether it's school, whether it's social media, everybody has an idea. And, with that idea, you may sometimes mold yourself to fit into what others like I can't say others, but what other people would make you feel comfortable being, right? So, Tex, like in your perspective, like what do you think about that? What do you think about the question, "Who am I?" What does that garner when it comes? What are the first thoughts that are garnered when you first think about that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something that is just to think about because thinking about how the brain develops, right, like from the point where you start having that consciousness of making your own decisions. I mean, by law, when you're 18, they say you're legally able to make decisions on your own, but like according to science, they say that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed till probably like 25 or even 28. And then sometimes they have it different for either girls or boys. And that's one of the things first to like to really think about is like, who am I really? You got to think about the social environment you're in, who is around you, what is around you. They say, tell me what you eat, I'll let you know who you are. Tell me who's around you, I'll tell you who you are is also kind of similar as well to that. Um, Another thing is, especially when your identity doesn't fit nearly in a box, for example, for both of us, right? We're both black men, right? Navigating sometimes predominantly, white spaces, I would say, or spaces that we might not see others that look like us in those spaces. And that sometimes might question, and it might make you question, like, who am I really? Am I supposed to be here? Is this my right space for me? And that thing is something sometimes you can find yourself becoming conditioned to doing all the time in certain environments. And I've felt like I've had to kind of code switch. Definitely would say I have done that pretty damn well in especially language. I used to have an accent before, but I got called all these. I've said this before, probably in the previous episode, but I said to somebody, I told him, look, the next time you see me, I'm gonna speak and talk like you. You're not even gonna know, even not even gonna remember where I'm from. And I did. But it's not like I lost the identity of who I am. I can still do it. It's just the fact that I had to find a way to code switch to be able to understand of who am I really in these certain spaces. Um, so code switching is not a bad thing, I would say, right? But it sometimes can make you lose your identity in a way that you don't even realize consciously or even subconsciously. And also speaking a certain way or acting a certain way, just to be safe or just to be enough. I'm gonna be the first person to say this honestly. I don't give a damn what anybody says. You can say anything. I can do anything. At the end of the day, I wholeheartedly believe in accountability. If you can hold yourself accountable to everything that you're doing and hold everybody else accountable and around your circles, I think that is one of the biggest things you can ever do for yourself and understanding your own identity. Um, and then also just kind of add on to this before I pass it on to you, Gabe, is that when you have that moment of an identity crisis, it means that you are actually in that phase of growth and development, and you're actually now starting to create your own decisions and creating your own path. So when that moment is hitting, don't feel like it's time to stop and just quit. Nah, that's actually called growth. Think about like a butterfly or like they say it's a butterfly, right? A butterfly starts off as a caterpillar or it
Uh-huh.
goes into a cocoon and then it soars its wings and stuff like that. Just think about it like that. When you're in that identity crisis phase, it's kind of you trying to break out of your shell to really now have that self-confidence that you really, really are looking for. So that's kind of what I would say when it comes to that. The whole aspect is who am I really, So yeah, man.
I really like the words that you used. Two things that pinged for me, right, was identity crisis and code switching. And just for our listeners out there, those that may not know the true definitions of this, I did want to explain it so you can have a deeper context, right? So, when it comes to first, like code switching, right, this is like a process from shifting from one linguistic code to another, right? So you may talk with different groups, different people, different types of businesses in different ways, and it all depends on the different social context and controversial setting. This often does involve using multiple language, i.e., for Tex, he speaks six different languages. I may be, embellishing that a little
Don't
bit.
don't glaze me like that. Now, come
But
on now.
he speaks a lot of languages. I've definitely I speak a few languages as well. Just conversational things. I speak a little bit of Spanish, a little Punjabi, a little English, here and there, and I know a little bit of Tagalog. But hey. Being able to know more in these different language varieties, different social contexts, these different groups of people, right? It puts you in a different space. This space is something of a tool, but it's also something that could also be very useful for you in your life. So don't take code switching as oh, I'm not being myself, but you're learning how to be yourself in these different places, right? However, I did want to also give a definition of what an identity crisis is, and for our viewers, our listeners out there, this is a period of confusion. It is a period of doubt surrounding oneself or, the sense of self that you may have. And this often does occur in the times like piggybacking off of what Tech said. These are the transition moments or the major life moments, right? This is a phase where, you question, you reassess yourself, and you commonly may experience this maybe in adolescence or any other significant life change. I know for us, that college to work life change, right? They call that first year is a buffer, and you change your entire psychological and approach to life, because you go from being in school, now you're in the workforce, or now you're looking for a job. You go from in high school, you finish high school, and for some people that don't go to college, you're directly into the workforce. You're directly to getting your bag, getting your money. And so I just wanted to explain that, so for some of our listeners and viewers here, just so they have a deeper context on what you were explaining there. But in addition as well, just following up what you said, with all the pressure that you have, with all the different things that are going on in this shift or in this transition, right? This may put you in a position of mental unclarity, where you may experience chips away at your own mental health, right? You may start questioning yourself, and some parts of you may carry the shame of your identity that are actually your strength. I know for a long time, for example, right? We went to a PWI institution college, right? And being black was a rarity. However, being put in that situation where there's so few of us, I saw it as my strength for sure, especially when I stick out in classes, and when I stick out as the only person, in these rooms. Now I'm in a position where I am in a predominantly white institution in terms of the workplace that I'm in. However, being one of the token or the sole DEI initiative black individuals in this place, it is my strength. My color is my strength. My culture is my strength. The way that I was socialized is my strength. That's how I relate with the real world. That's how I relate with the people around me. Now, then again, it's when you don't see that your story is reflected, right, in those situations, though, right, that it becomes easy to believe that you are the problem. And I just want to make sure, at the end of the day, hey, you may be put in these situations for everybody, but you are not the problem. We got to find the problem, put a pin in it, boom, target it, work through it, and work through that transition so that you can move forward. And that'll do it for everything that I had to say right there. Did you have anything else left for segment one, Tex?
Uh, yeah, I mean, just to transition to kind of our next segment to kind of wrap up what we were talking about there is kind of it's real when you don't see your story reflected, you definitely start thinking you're the problem, which, sometimes I've definitely dealt with it. And not to say that, we hated where we went to college. It's not that we hated it. It was just that we became socially aware and conscious, and we were absorbing information, but we had to find our footpath and our pathway to what we're doing. We started seeing our story reflected by our peers, and then we was like, okay, we're walking us along the same rope together, so okay, we can do this together. So it takes a collective effort sometimes, instead of you just feeling like you're all by yourself. And shout out to Lambda Kappa chapter, Blue Phi all day at UC Davis. Um, Now, kind of to segue into the next part of our conversation is mental health isn't a luxury, right? Sometimes people want to say that this topic is overly talked about, oversaturated, and just do whatever. Nah, man, that's why there's a whole field and a whole science called psychology. That's why it exists. It tells you how the brain works and how these chemicals are affecting your body and blah, 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 all those things. So mental health isn't some extra thing. It's essential. But in a lot of our communities, it's still taboo to even say, I'm struggling. You know, one thing I definitely have had to. I used to always be so scared to ask for help. Like I didn't care. Even if I needed $1, I was like, I'm gonna go find a way to get it. I didn't care. But I realized closed mouths don't get fed. If you don't speak up for yourself, don't advocate for yourself, you can't get to where you want to get to. That's why these things exist in our current society. Um, and sometimes some people, like for some communities, they aren't raised with therapy or the aspect of utilizing their resources or their collective community to be able to understand who they are. Sometimes they're raised with just tough it out. Just tough it out. And for example, I'm a WWE fan, right? And sometimes some characters in WWE, they are told, just go out there. If the audience reacts, the audience reacts. They don't react, just keep doing what you're supposed to doing. But the whole goal of WWE is to actually get the audience engaged. If the audience is booing you, you're doing something right. If they're cheering, you're doing something right. If they ain't doing none of that, you're definitely doing something wrong. Now, I say that because it's very important to understand that mental health isn't a luxury. Your thoughts in your own brain, my thoughts in my own brain sometimes, I find myself spiraling down through those thoughts, and I'm like, I need to get these thoughts out of my head to kind of see where I'm going with this. And that's where things like talk therapy comes in, cognitive behavior therapy comes in, or just finding a hobby that gets you distracted and gets you kind of reflect and kind of, what do they call it? Rejuvenate yourself, right? And it ties back to what this series is about. It's the aspect of roots of resilience. You got to go back to your roots of what is making you resilient as an individual, because just toughing it out sometimes ain't going to make it, man. And I've definitely experienced that myself, to where I keep telling myself, just tough it out. Sometimes it work. Keyword, sometimes. That's the key. Sometimes it works, but you don't always want to be on sometimes. You always want to give yourself, your body, your mind, and your soul some level of clarity and kind of what you are trying to do. That's why, you know, our previous part of our conversation started off with the question, who am I really? Because that all starts up here, and what goes on up here translates down into, everything else that goes on. What is it? What's that thing in anime and Naruto, chakra? Your chakra. But we ain't gonna get into that right now. But
Man, we don't get into
anyway,
it.
anyways, but yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say on that, Gabe. Pass it on to you on this kind of this part of the conversation, man.
Take that lob and I'm gonna dunk it. So I know a lot of the times, right, with mental health, especially with the title of the segment, right? Mental health is not a luxury, right? It isn't, and even for people that do have some access for it, right? Especially in our community, the Black community, it's kind of like voodoo, in a way that even if you do have access or the resources to it, a lot of people still don't seek it or don't use it. I know, for instance, and I can only speak about this now because I've already worked through it. But when I had lost a significant person in my life at one point, I was I was in therapy, but I was mentally checked out just because of all the stigmas around mental health. It's like, man, I don't need this. I don't know why I'm doing this. And I was young at the time, and I think I was like 14, 15. But uh, a lot of the times, right, even when you have access to it or you're in these places, right, you are socialized yourself to not use it, to not, you know, get the most out of it, and like you said, there's literal studies and there's an entire field about this. But, we as a people need to make sure that we're taking advantage of not only that study, that group, but the research that we do have available to us. And one thing that you do always hear a lot, and it's something I heard a lot as well growing up, right? Especially when you're dealing with things that may be affecting your mental health, loss or pain, suffering, long suffering, all these things, you always hear pray about it. I grew up in a church. I hear that every day. Pray about it. Go to pray, you know, or, oh, you're just being dramatic. It's not that big of a deal, but pain, it doesn't disappear because you ignore it. Right. Let's repeat that again. Let's say it one more time for people to back. Pain does not disappear because you ignore it. It just finds a new place to live. That may be in your sleep. That may be in your anxiety. It may be in your shoulders. I know a lot of people hold tension in their shoulders. I know, I got some family members that do. And, they're locked up tight because you've dealt with so much pain, so much agony, and you've just suffered in your own silence. And so that's what I'll leave for you right there, Tex. I think that's a good segue point to close out this segment. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just want to echo what you said there. Pain doesn't leave the body because you ignore it. It just finds a new place to live. You kick a cockroach out of your house, it's gonna go find somewhere else to go live.
We stomp cockroaches. Pause. Ain't kicking nothing out. You what?
You say I'm stopping it.
You are getting eviscerated off the property. I am sorry. Bugman, what is it? Exterminator? Yeah,
Exterminator. Exterminator,
come
come and
exterminate.
exterminate this. But
Do your
anyways,
job, big boy. Yeah, yeah.
so, that's really important to understand is that pain doesn't just disappear because you ignore it. And speaking from my own personal experience, what has helped me learn and also just being part of different communities and different spaces and echoing off different people's, thoughts and soundboards as human beings is, learning to name your emotion isn't a weakness. One thing I've learned to say is that don't say I'm depressed. You can say I'm experiencing some sort of depression, and because of so and so, right? Don't just say you're depressed. Don't just label yourself as that feeling. It's just something that you're experiencing in the moment. Um, so it's wisdom for yourself, right? That's something I definitely could say is very important to understand. And the more I leaned into that, the more I realized I don't want just to survive. Going back to our first part of this series, you just don't want to be in survival mode all the time. You want to thrive as your whole self. That includes softness, my fear, my joy, my truth. Ain't nothing wrong as being an emotional guy. Ain't nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Ain't nothing wrong with a man crying. There's nothing wrong with that.
Hold on. You
Well,
right.
which
You right.
ain't
You
not,
right.
ain't
You
nothing wrong
right.
with
You
that.
right. You right. Nah.
Sometimes it can be stigmatized as, don't do that. Yes, I understand in some situations it's just like, okay, what's the reason of this emotion? And that's the whole point of wanting to thrive as your whole self is being able to learn and name that emotion so you don't take yourself out of don't put yourself in a situation that just eradicates your whole identity as a person, only gets classified as this person as, oh, this person's always depressed, always angry, always this, doing that. That is just part of the growing pain that will not disappear because you ignore it. You just have to find a way to cope with it. And one thing I will actually like to emphasize here, um, it's just because I've been doing a lot of being a peer leader with Brother Be Well of Mental Health California, and we've been doing this whole summer series about youth substance abuse prevention. And being in these sessions, man,
Tell me
I've
about
been
it.
I've been learning a lot actually about myself because I'm now kind of the age where I'm now out of that. I guess they consider the youth phase, but I'm still a youth. I would still consider I still look good and blessed. And
You know what I'm saying? Hey, black don't crack, brother. Black don't crack.
never does.
Come
And
on now.
think about the fact that I don't know. I sent you this TikTok somebody posted, bro. When we was in college, there was times where we would so-called engage in an activity that was so fumical. I don't know what the word is. And funny enough, we didn't have ChatGPT back then. That's just a funny thought I had. I was like, we didn't have ChatGPT back then. We was doing that thing under the fumical senses. Not That's not the moral of my point. My moral of my point is that we found ourselves using that as a coping way because we were going through a lot of things and we did not know how to we didn't have those techniques or coping strategies just because of the environments we came in or just because of who we are. Some people did. Some people were exposed to it early. We were not. Well, I was not. And then I got exposed to it and started understanding that, oh, what I'm doing now does have a consequence at some point in life. Even though it can be good or bad, it does still have a consequence. It can be positive or negative sometime down the line. And that's kind of what is important in understanding the aspect of mental health isn't a luxury. It's actually something that you should realize that your thoughts, your ideas, they are your reality, but it's just trying to understand how to cope and find a way not just to ignore them, but address them for yourself so that you can be the best whole self yourself. And to kind of wrap this up on this part before we get into our next section, to our next part of the conversation is that if you ever look yourself in the mirror and you start questioning yourself. And I remember did this one time with this girl one time. I was dating back in the day, and I remember one time me and her looked in the mirror with each other, and first thing she said, "I'm ugly." I was like, first of all, I had to acknowledge myself and tell myself, I don't mess around with no ugly. Okay, so that was the first thing I told myself. I was like, nah. In my mind, I was like, you ain't ugly. But what she said to herself is an identity she's trying to claim to herself because of an insecurity she's dealing with. So as a person who is a part of that life that she's living, all I can do actually is actually acknowledge the fact that yes, she's dealing with something, and that's why she's saying that. And what am I supposed to do as technically the person she's dating is give her a level of confidence to let her know you are actually not what you're saying to yourself because you're actually a very gorgeous person. And sometimes it just takes somebody else's words to change somebody's day. And then from that moment, I made a rule. Well, it didn't last too long, but I made a rule between that relationship is that when you look yourself in the mirror, instead of saying the so-called negative things that people say, try to say something positive. Just try to say it, even if you don't feel it. Just try to say it, and just see how it will instantly change how you feel. Because the words that you say, the words that you hear, it does have an impact on the chemicals that your brain does release. Something I learned recently. Uh, so that's all I just wanted to say about that. You know, talk to yourself nice, but also be a critic of yourself in a good way. Um, and don't be too hard on yourself. You know. So that's all I gotta say about that,
I like
Gabe.
that.
I don't
I
know,
like that.
man.
I think that's the perfect transition point as well, because when it comes to yourself, right, identifying who you are, understanding your cultural background, the different phenomenon that you know raise you to be who you are. We are finding ourselves and understanding ourselves together, right? And so piggybacking off of what you had just said, I remember those days in college. We were finding different ways to cope. We were finding different coping mechanisms. Do we just
Very
didn't
fumous, I think. Is that a word? I don't know.
very aromatic. And so when
Go
it
word.
comes to the differences of who finding who you are, of course, everybody has their own path that they got to walk. Whether it's uh, finding aromatic influences, or touching grass, or going outside, going on a walk, speaking to a counselor. We all have our different things of becoming ourselves. But the truth is, right, when you look in the mirror and you speak to yourself, right, you tell yourself the cold hard truth. This is who you are. If you want to be or get to where you want to be, these are the steps you need to take. Hey, positive affirmations go a long way, but it takes a lot of courage to speak the truth, to walk the truth, to be the truth. And because once you take that mask off, and a mask, shout out W.E.D. Du Bois with the veil, the mask that you're showing to the world. But there's also somebody else underneath that mask, and that's who you are. That's that character. When you remove that mask, shout out Future Mask Off, everyone's not going to clap for you. But the ones who see you are really going to see you. And they're the ones worth building with. They're the ones sticking it through for. Shout out my guy Tex. Shout out, all the rest of the people that have been there, throughout my life. But those are the people that that are going to be in your lifeboat. They say there's an old um, Asian saying. I may not be correct with the exact culture, but they say it's a lifeboat. And you have five, six, seven people that are really going to be on a lifeboat with you, that are you're going to work through, the different ebbs and flows of life with. And the ones that really see you for you underneath that veil, understand you, still love you, still work with you, still cherish you, still, choose you over, what you were trying to be. They're the ones that's worth building with. They're the ones worth traversing this world with, and moving forward. And I want to, transition into what that is. And that's what community is, that's what finding a community is. It may not be your family. It may not be, your aunts, uncles, your best friends that you have now. It may be somebody you meet on the side of the road, at a library, somewhere random, outside walking in the street. You get in contact, and you just find that you guys click. You never know what that may be. And, community in itself, finding that community, finding your people matters, because without people, without community, you're just one person, and how can you be a voice of change? Which I challenge you all to be a voice of change. How can you be a voice of change if you don't have a community to change? So, I'll leave it with that.
That's why community matters. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. We need safe spaces like this one. where we're allowed, to show up real and raw, where we're not just performing, where we're just being you. And one of the greatest things that I can say, I'm really into entrepreneurism and everything like that. And in every person who I've met that is an entrepreneur, or even like somebody who is whatever billionaire, millionaire, whatever you want to consider or is considered great, one thing they always say is just be you, which makes me go back to city, staying true to yourself. I remember sitting in my room and like, you know what, I'm gonna coin this term and I'm gonna just start it and make it into something. And that was just me being me. And now it's something that I have continued doing just because it's being me being me. So it's just very important. One, community does matter. And it's important to kind of find that space in that area that you're going to be in. And if you got an idea, I want to emphasize this one last point before I pass it to you, Gabe. One last point I want to make here. If you have an idea, it's very great that you have the idea and you can have the most creative idea. But if your creative idea has no innovation behind it, or if there's no plan of execution on it, I'm gonna just be honest and tell you straight up, forget about it. Just forget about that idea. Every idea is great, but the greatest ideas are the ones that actually plan out. So if you have an idea, take it away from paper and put it into actual action.
But
Trial
it,
and error. That's the only way to actually see if your idea works. Because if you don't try it, you'll never know. And then you'll look back and be like, oh man, maybe if I would have just believed in myself more back then, I would have done it. Ah, hell no, no, just do it now. Just get it
yeah,
done.
pay for that or forget about it. Straight up.
Hey, Nike did it. Just do it.
Let's do it, baby. Come on now. Game makes go out to more every day. Yes, sir. Just play.
We'll talk about Game X actually in the next episode 3 series of the Roots of Resilience series. But yeah, I'll let Gabe close us out here. And you want to do the 3 for the founders for this or?
No, we're good. We're good. We're good. We're good.
Ah, bet, bet, bet.
This is our our new event
Exclusive
exclusive.
series.
Right, right, right. We're gonna make sure we do it correctly. Yes, sir. So if you guys are listening and you've been hiding parts of yourself just to fit in, this is a reminder: you are worthy. You don't need to shrink to survive. Be you. Just be you and do you. Just do it. Shout out Nike. Now, here's the challenge. What's one part of your identity that you've been dimming? Right. You know, this week, honor it. Let it breathe. Let it be seen. Let's make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be yourself, And I'm going to close this out with this. In our next episode, we're going to explore what it means to heal together. We'll talk about community care, collective strength, and what it looks like to build resilience as a we, not just a me. This is
And
your host,
yes, sir.
Gabe Martinez, coming to you live and direct from Voice of Change in our second episode of our 3-part series, Roots of Resilience. My co-host Tex Wimbuie, the wonderful, illustrious, magnificent man that he is. Go ahead and close us out.
Thank you, Mr. Midas Martinez. And until then, remember, you're not alone. You're not too much. And you never had to be less. This is episode 2 of the Roots of Resilience. Tex Wembley here signing out. We are the Voices of
Voices of
Change.
Change. And this is the Roots of Resilience.
Thank y'all so much.
Yes, sir.